Are you streaming? Oh. Okay. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to Lunch and Learn today. It's nice to see you all. I'm Jennifer Vanette. I'm the outreach coordinator here at the Cass Museum, so it's my great pleasure to welcome you all. And then just a couple housekeeping notes. If you need to use a restroom, there is one just outside that back door to the room. And there are also refreshments on the back table if you'd like to help yourself. And then a few little flyers about some upcoming things that are happening. And so just to give you a heads up, because I know this crowd and these familiar faces, you love the different types of talks we have, and we love that for you. So Thursday, we have History After Hours. That's our evening programming. So June 15th at 5:30, Dr. Andrew Werman from CMU will talk about his research that went into his book, Contagion of Liberty. And so that will be Thursday evening. And then the next Lunch and Learn opportunity is Tuesday, June 27th at noon. And there we have Bevan Cohen, who will talk about seed saving and sharing. I know I need it. I like seeing things grow, but I don't know how we get there besides going to the store and buying the package. So we'll all learn something. But that kind of ties into our newest exhibit that just opened last week, Growing Saginaw County Agriculture and Enterprise. So sprinkled throughout the summer here, we'll have a little bit of programming that also ties into how we think about how our food sources or how things grow, and I think that will be fun. So be sure to check out that exhibit in Centennial Hall at some point, either this visit or another one. And without further ado, I will introduce our speaker, Dr. David Nichols. He is a professor of philosophy at SVSU. Those of you Michiganders, you can be happy because apparently he got his BA at University of Michigan, but his MA at Michigan State. So he covered the bases, and we're all okay.
I like to say something to offend everyone. Yeah.
And then you also earned your PhD at Boston University. If your LinkedIn is correct, I didn't have time to double check this, but you do teach, I understand, Greek philosophy, Asian philosophy, and existentialism.
Yeah.
And you're also today our resident expert on the Saginaw Greek community, and I think you'll probably touch on Greek Fest, which is coming up as well. Yep. All right. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much. Let me first tell you how excited I am to be here. Right now, I'm playing hooky because on the corner of Mackinac and McCarty, where the Greek Festival will take place this weekend, this right now is the heavy setup time. This is when we have high schoolers, often football players and so on, that we bring in to help. But this is when we bring out all the big machinery, the Euro machines, 15 of these big heavy machines, and ovens, and there's all these tents, and we pound stakes in the ground and make a fence all the way around it, and on and on and on and on. And I don't have to do that today, but not because you got me out of it, because I had a hip surgery, so I have the perfect excuse now. But I'm very happy to be here with you. But I was the president of the Greek Festival for 5 years in a row, and then the last 2 I have not been. So I'm happy there's some younger folks that are coming up and taking my place, but I'm still on the board for the Greek Festival, and we'll be working the Greek Festival, just easier stuff this time around. But we can talk about that if you want to, and I definitely want to show you some things about the Greek Festival and its history. And I'm very active in St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church there in the township, and I want to say some things about the history of that church. I've been a parish council member quite a number of years, and I teach Sunday school and all kinds of stuff. So, since maybe just small enough of a crowd, I could get to know something about you. I wonder if each of you could tell me your name and tell me why are you here? Have you been to the Greek Festival before? Have you been to St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church before, some function? Do you know some crazy Greek person? Like, what is it that, oh boy, that's, yeah, they're calling me from the site right now. We're going to let it go. I'm actually really happy about that. Yeah, or what would you, maybe even just interested in hearing about? What's your name?
I'm Sylvia. I live out that way. I pass that. I'm down McCarty 100 times a week. I've been to the festival just once. I love baklava.
Yeah.
With my type 2, it doesn't like it. And I've never been in the church, which I would love to.
Yeah. Well, when you go to the festival, you can get a church tour on the hour. We do church tours, and you should really do that now, even if you've been on that church tour, because we have new iconography. So, and I'm really happy about this. We're going to be getting more and more, but we just had an iconographer. He's Ukrainian American, and he's from Texas. He's originally from Ukraine, and he just did a little bit more of our iconography. But I'll show you some images. But yeah, it's always worth a step inside. Your name? Oh, okay, that's a good time to come. Good. Yeah. Good. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I want to talk about that. The restaurant thing. That's really how this gets started. So. Okay. 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 Good. Yeah, that's really important for the early immigration wave. Didn't mean to skip you, Catherine. You want to say introduce yourself? She has no choice. Okay. How about you? I want to talk about that too, yeah. Well, it's blown down many times, but you're talking about the really bad year. I know what you're talking about. Okay, good. Yeah.
My name's Dave Preston. We have been going to the Greek Festival for years, and honestly, back in the day, it was a who's who in Saginaw Township.
Yeah, that's true.
So jokingly, I tell my kids, I run into my accountant, my and it was just kind of like, see who you were with. So this was good time. I have toured the basement kitchen
Yeah.
with a fellow named Gus.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, what you do year-round, bake and cook is phenomenal.
It's a lot of work. Yeah. Good.
My name's Jan, and I've been going forever. So, hey, boy, I ended up moving back into the township, and my kids grew up through the school all 12 years. So it was just like a reunion, too.
Yeah.
Everybody, we knew everybody. We love the food. Oh, my God. A lot of times.
I know. We had the worst. I think we were cursed, actually. Yeah. 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 The year before COVID was the deluge year. That was really awful. Yeah. There've been disaster years like that. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Oh, okay. Oh. That's hard not to hear, yeah. Oh, thank you. Yep.
I've been going on and off since it started. I remember a lot of the money from a long time.
Yeah.
And
I can give you some advice afterwards. I go regularly with my wife. Okay. Oh yeah. Oh yes. Oh yeah. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I know them both very well. Okay. I think you should go. Yeah. This is fantastic. Yeah.
I'm Nancy. I've attended numerous times. The food is phenomenal. It's a reunion when you go and see all your friends that maybe you haven't seen for a while. A friend of mine who's come on here, Gabby.
Yeah, that's my aunt.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, lost track of her through the years.
Yeah.
But also, it's amazing when you see the tents come down and you think, how did they get so many people in that following year? And
Tell me about it. Yeah.
really supports it so well.
Yep. Thank you.
I'm Jerry Hemsworth. I live in the neighborhood there. We have attended, go by there frequently. I'm amazed at how the festival has developed. When it first started, was now
Yeah.
really open. I like to experience lots of things. So
Baklava.
that's great.
Close enough.
Very good.
Sounds like you have your mouth full of it, right? Yeah. Go ahead.
But, and yes, I've been to the festival and I like the dancers, I like the food. But we had a special project back in 2012. Louis Economo was the, I think, the originator of the street
Yes.
festival. He was a friend of mine. They're both in Nichols-Saginaw High School. And in honor of the 75th anniversary of St. Nicholas Church, the Creek Festival decided to donate $5,000 in order to restore the LaSalle sign, which is at 100 block of South Washington. So on one side, real estate, the other side, but the project was really great. And the bishop came from Detroit. We had all of these high officials that came from Detroit for the dedication on October 20th, 2012. So if you're ever in the neighborhood and it's kind of dark, you can look out there and see the sales sign. Wonderful project. The other part of it is that Christina's sign company was also owned by a Greek. We had a Greek sign maker, a Greek restaurant, and it was run by Nick Moggins.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Okay, well, we'll look at a picture or two. Yeah. Oh. Oh. Yeah. Huh? Yep. Okay. Nice. Very good. How about you, man? Yeah. 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 Sometimes the priest, sometimes not. We've got some parish council members that are pretty good at it too.
My name is Bruce Mackinnon. I'm from the city, and I'm really excited that I've never been to the festival, but I find out what's going on.
Yeah. Very good. Well, glad you're here. How about over here? Ma'am, what's your name? Yeah. Oh, yes, I know who Barb is, yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah. You don't have to be young now. You can go dance with us this weekend. We come out, we start dancing on the stage, and we go out into the parking lot usually, and people join in. So you probably know it better than a lot of them. Oh, good. That's great. Fantastic. I like folk music, and I'd like to learn more about it. I probably don't know as much as you do. How about back here in this corner? Glad to be with you. And you, sir? That's a I shouldn't have said anything. Yeah. Yeah. Right. A lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of shady stuff going on at the festival. And you mentioned Uzo. There are these old Greek guys that I know. I used to like work in, Euro tent or something like that, and they're coming around with this kind of moonshine liquid. I don't know. It's their own special Uzo-like concoction, and it's really dangerous. Really bad. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Did you want to say anything? Anything? I'll just stop by. How about you? Yeah. Okay. Well, we're glad you're here. Okay. Well, I'm a professor. I'm used to the classroom experience. I prefer discussion more than I like lecture. So feel free at any point to interject a question or a comment, maybe something some experience you've had that's related to things I'm talking about. But otherwise, I'll kind of go quickly through the frames and show you what I'm working on. So I volunteered. I volunteer for a lot of things, and I shouldn't be doing that. I volunteered to be the chair of the Greek Festival. But at any rate, I volunteered even more recently to be a kind of archivist for St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church. And that's because we're at about, depends on how you count the years, 85 years roughly going. And of course, we're going to get to a 100-year anniversary. And so I've asked all the senior members of the church to rummage through their attics. Bring me photos. Bring me anything that we can use, because there's so much that gets lost to history, and someone's got to bring the stuff together. So I'm working on a photo album this year for the church as kind of a gift to church members. And we're going to have actually, we haven't planned the exact dates and such, but in late October we'll have our annual St. Demetrius Day celebration. And we haven't decided, I don't think, exactly which day it's going to be, but we're going to invite people from the community to come in and get a church tour. And so we'll display a lot of the history there. But anyway, I wanted to put together a photo album with some of these old photos, just for people to have a sense of the history, and because the congregation is changing quite a bit. It's less than half Greek now, ethnically, which is fine. It's actually a really exciting time. It's a very incredibly diverse church right now. We can talk about that too. But at any rate, this might be the best place to start. Where it all ends. So at Forest Lawn Cemetery, there's a section 22. That's the Greek section. I'm spending some time there, looking at the graves and matching names to different things. And I counted 70 names, Greek names, male, female names, that where the birth date was before the year 1900. I thought that was interesting. Now, that doesn't mean they're coming here necessarily before 1900. A lot of them are really coming around 1910 and onward. And then what's interesting also is the death date. So like you get a kind of influx around the time that the first church is built in 1940. So this becomes probably some families are starting to bury their dead here. And they're connected as relatives and friends, but these Greeks that know each other in Saginaw, and so this becomes kind of an area where they're burying the dead. But then it becomes a church thing to do it, and so there's I don't know, a couple hundred graves, both sides of the path there, quite a few, and some of them are clearly military headstones. People served in U.S. Armed Forces and so on. But anyway, lots to see there. And before 1900, there's not that many Greek immigrants in the United States. They're one of the last European waves. Probably 1880s, starting to get an influx, maybe as many as 1,000 in the U.S. And it's thought that the earliest ones are coming over actually as very young men, maybe boys. A lot of them are essentially slaves on ships, on Turkish ships, because Greece was run for about 400 years by the Ottoman Empire up until 1821. But then a lot of Greek-speaking territory was still owned by Turks, and is today. And so there were a lot of Greek-speaking people, Christians, that were taken as slaves and running ships. And they would see American ships, and they would jump overboard and swim to the ship. Or American naval officers sometimes would buy them to free them, and probably help on the ship until the next time you get back to the U.S. and then you'd be free. So this seems to be one of the earliest sources for Greeks coming in. The phenomenon of Saginaw is probably quite common. In the early 1900s, they're mostly young men that are coming. And they're coming for reasons that are pretty similar to a lot of immigrant waves. They're coming because Greece is a really poor country. And in those early days, you had to, if you were male, you had to serve 3 years mandatory in the Greek army. And then in World War I, a lot of them didn't want to do it. They didn't want, it was Allied forces, but they didn't really see the value for the larger picture, or they just felt this was not going to be the best thing for their family. Their family was dependent on them. So typically what would happen, other immigrant groups did this too, Italians, for instance, a good example. Your family would put the one marble on that number on the Russian, the roulette table, Okay, let's go with oldest son. We're going to send him to the United States. Let's hope something good happens. Let's hope he gets a job. Maybe he can send some money back. Maybe he can get really established and we can start sending more family members, that sort of thing. So probably almost all males in the early days. 1910, 1930 seems like quite a few men. And then they start getting jobs primarily as busboys, because you don't need to speak English to bus tables. Now, different ethnic groups kind of have their thing, right? And so I like to study other immigrant groups in the U.S. And one that fascinates me is like the Chinatown experience in New York City, Chicago, San Francisco. There's kind of a stereotype now that if you're Chinese American, you're going to run a laundromat. The reason there's that stereotype is because a lot of the Chinese immigrants that came in, that was really the only work they could get was to wash people's clothes. Because all you needed was a tub and a hot iron, basically, and a board. And you could often get those on loan. And you didn't necessarily speak English very well to do it. And so in Chicago especially, in Chinatown, I can tell you the story there at the museum that people would do this, the early immigrants, and they would iron for next to nothing. They would iron for less than everyone else. And then they would just work all day, every day, saving money. So there are often these cheap inns, right, the immigrants look for. And for some reason, in Saginaw, but in many other places in the United States, Greeks tended to go towards restaurants. Maybe these young men just felt comfortable in the kitchen. Maybe they knew they had something good, right? But they would get established, usually bussing tables. If you could learn English in a couple of years, you might wait tables. Or you might just go to the kitchen, might get access to the kitchen. But the goal, almost always, was to own your own establishment. Okay? So, by 1934, I got some really good records on this. 1934, I've got a listing from 1934 of 33 business establishments in Saginaw, in the city itself, that were run by 33. Most of them restaurants or food related in some way. And this included also, there was a pastry shop. But there were some exceptions. There were things, sometimes you might come over and you have a skill, and so you might try to make a go of that. There was a hattery. There's a Greek gentleman who ran a hat shop. There were things like that. But most of these, by the early 1930s, were on Washington Avenue, East Genesee, Jefferson, a little bit on Michigan, and a little bit on Court Street. What's that? Zorba's. I got a picture, yeah. Tom Remus. Zorba's. Retired not too long ago. He's kind of late in it, but yeah, he ran it for like 30 years or so, but that was kind of the late holdout. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of the story of how they're getting started. And then I'll show you some images. So this is just, a lot of us have some kind of immigrant story, So this is my great-grandfather. He did end up in Saginaw late in life, but his Ellis Island story, 16 years old, ends up in Ohio. Yep, starts running some confectionery shop, and then, but it's sort of typical story, that kind of thing. My wife is, so I'm only part Greek, but my dad's side, my wife is the whole thing, and so. Her dad's side was from the Sioux. And there's actually quite a number of Greeks that had immigrants that were in the UP. A lot of them came in illegally. They jumped off ships at the locks. And but her mom was from Athens. But yeah, we could talk about Greece if you have any questions. But here, 1919, this photo. This is the Club Billiard Parlor on Washington Avenue. Co-owned by Lou Majoris and Nick Callos. And I know their descendants. And so this is kind of typical. So you've got kind of multiple things going on here. You've got a barber shop, but you got a billiard tables back there, and it looks like a men's hangout, right? So they're doing there. But yeah, this like Nick Majoris, I'm sorry, Lou Majoris. His story was he was born in 1893, came to the U.S. in 1919, and almost immediately opened the club, barber shop, and billiard parlor. And I don't know how he got the funding for it, but he was there until his retirement in 1972. His son, Themi Majoris, I'm good friends with. He'll be here for the festival, helping me to count money. I get the air conditioned room. I'm so happy. Okay, so but there's one of them, and here's another one from 1930s in Bay City. So fewer establishments in Bay City, about a dozen. Fewer yet in Midland. Decent number in Owasso, actually, around this time. But this is the Arcadia restaurant downtown, and James Stamos, who I think is the grandfather of State Representative Jim Stamos, who termed out, so he's taking a break right now as a rep, but he's still active in our church too. He's been on our parish council not too long ago. But yeah, here's a photo. This is kind of typical for the places that run now. Long-running ones. Maybe some of you guys, my heart is broken. This place closed recently. Right? Yeah. Okay. So I know some of the Karases, and yeah, this was running for almost 100 years before it closed. I think COVID was kind of the death knell finally, but yeah, maybe it was going downhill behind it before that. And it had, it was the Red Lion Diner early on. Not sure exactly which year it got started, but yeah, I mean, there's some long-running establishments. Karis is a Greek name, but yeah, there's Zorba's and there's Tom Vremis, and he finally retired, hung it up, but yeah, about 30 years I think he was running Zorba's. The Gratiot and I can't remember the Harrison. I was going to say Harrison. Yeah, yeah, great guy. Yeah, I know. Makes me sad. But you know, a lot of restaurants kept going. I mean, when I was growing up, there was the big thing was Johnny's Bonanza. You remember Johnny's Bonanza? So Johnny Zestos ran that. That was only one of the places that he was running. There was a lot of places that you didn't even know were Greek owned, but I remember my wife and I, we go on a road trip somewhere in the country, you stop at a diner, you see that one Greek thing on the menu, you're like, oh, they're Greek. And then I got to have a long conversation. So, actually, Skoda. We were up at Skoda last summer. There's a diner up there. It's run by a Greek family. They were from Detroit originally, but the owner, he's at least in his 70s, but he sat down and talked with us, and he said, yeah, he was running a restaurant in Detroit, but just really wanted something that reminded him of Greece. And we saw Skoda. I said, I want to go to the water. So that's what they're doing. But yeah, sometimes you get those little clues. And Fuzzies on Court Street, right? The Mendex are one of the families that runs this. They've been doing that for a long time. And so you can get some Greek items on the menu there too. So there's still a little bit around, but not much, right? Most of this has come to an end. Okay, so we know that there were all these Greeks downtown Saginaw, and we know that they, as early as 1929, started meeting third floor of the Vlasis building, which is on Court Street, you know where Jake's is now. So it was like right on the other side of it. So here's the electric train company, that's 410. So 411 will be the other side of the street, this is 411. And there was a third floor. So the Vlasis brothers were Greek, and they had this large floor open, and so they invited Greeks to come in and make use of it. So they would meet on a regular basis to play games and Greek dance and play music. And then in some corner, so this is kind of a late photo actually, 1940, but I've seen one that is a little bit earlier than this, where kids are running relays or something like that. But one corner of it, they put up some icon screen, and they started inviting priests to come from Flint. There was already a Greek Orthodox church there. So he would come probably bi-weekly, I'm guessing, and he would, do communion with them and so forth. And we know, first Greek Orthodox marriage was celebrated in 1928, probably up there. I'm trying to think. There's some other things we know from those early days. First death we know of, 1924, 7-year-old boy, son of one Mr. Karios. So there was a funeral, presumably, Greek Orthodox funeral. So those days you could get a priest to come up from Flint, or if you really had to, from Detroit. Just to give you kind of sense of the timing of this, 1910, Annunciation Cathedral in Detroit. If you've been to Greek town, Detroit, it's a beautiful cathedral there. That was formed that year. So there's quite a number of Greeks probably in Detroit already at this time. And then the men from, especially 1928 to 1932, we know there was a bunch of Greek men that went back to Greece to get wives. They returned. And so it's not exactly clear how this happens. There's probably not one cookie cutter explanation for this, but they may have had someone waiting for them. And in Greek Orthodoxy, you have a betrothal service, not just the wedding service. So nowadays, like when I married my wife, we have you just run them back to back. But it used to be common to have a betrothal service first, and then a kind of courtship period for however long till you want to get married. And we know that some Greek immigrants to the United States, they would have men and women would have a betrothal service as a kind of promise before they leave. I'll come back for you. I'm saying, I'm going to come back, or I'm going to send to have you brought here. So I don't have any evidence of that happening in this case, but it's not impossible. Maybe something like that. But at any rate, the women start coming, and there's these needs, to have a regular priest, because you have children, you want to baptize them, and maybe you want your kids to grow up and get married in the church, and certainly funerals and so forth. So this is March 25th, so that's an important date. This was taken from a newspaper article, but probably the person who's reporting it doesn't realize what the celebration is. So what's the time difference between March 25th and December 25th? 9 months. So what's happening to the Virgin Mary 9 months before she gives birth? It's Annunciation. Right? The angel Gabriel comes and tells her that she's with child. So that's a really important festival for Greeks. So that's what they're doing here. Virgin Mary is very important in Greek Orthodox thought. So a bunch of men formed a chapter of a group called the American Hellenic Educational Progressive Association. Let's just say HEPA. And it's a mouthful. And I'm a member of it now. We're still going. We still have that chapter. And let's see, the first year, this is a 1930 photo, but it was 1927 where the men first formed this chapter. Now, the HEPA was an organization that started in Atlanta, Georgia in 1922. And it was an organization that kind of reminds me of the Masons in a little bit, but not that secretive, really. But it was a group for Greek immigrant men as a kind of protection against the KKK, because they were considered not white. That seems strange to me now, but if you're Greek, you're considered not white. And so this was the organization formed in Atlanta, and then they started creating more chapters throughout the country, and this spread really fast. And so these chapters put a lot of emphasis on education because they knew a lot of Greek immigrants needed to learn English. And also they wanted them to be educated in Greek history too, to not lose that. They didn't want them to lose their language. But also these chapters were very instrumental in starting churches. And that's exactly what happened in the Saginaw instance. So 1927, so 5 years after this national organization started, one started in Saginaw, we don't know how, they heard about it, but they got going, these men that were meeting up in the Vlasis building, came together, and 58 of them. I've got the original 1927 book back there if you want to see it at the end. 58 signatures signed in the year 1927. That's a lot of guys, right? Came together for this, to join this organization and to do some planning. Pick up the pace here. But they did. They started, but the rumor's always been that it was really the women that made this happen, because they were telling their husbands, "You gotta have a church. You gotta have a church." So, and I even have one of the original hats right here. That's something. Things you find in closets. But at any rate, these folks, families used to meet along the riverside a lot for picnics, and but then there were these AHAPA meetings where people from all over, Greeks from all over Michigan would come, Bay City and Saginaw, come together. And here's the first church. So 1940, only good photo I can find of it, if you can call it that. Not a lot, because that first church from 120 South 5th Street burnt down 10 years later. So, but there it is. They purchased this lot from, it was a Lutheran church. It had already been 74 years old. It was pretty old. But they had to do some reconstruction on the interior to make it more Greek Orthodox friendly. Here's a 1943 photo of members. And you can see the iconostasis, the icon screen behind it. And we still have a lot of those icons, actually, in the hallways of St. Demetrius. Wedding going on. And then, Father Stathis was the first long-term priest starting in 1940. Came from Greece, 10 years, started up Greek school. They would meet 3 days a week after school. Kids would have, boys and girls, come learn their Greek, and choir. And sometimes they marched the streets, especially World War II. Hitler came in to Athens in 1941. So they would take up collections. Kids would go to the theaters with cans, looking for coins, try to raise money to send as a relief effort to Greece. Because a lot of people were starving in Greece while Hitler was there. Burning of the first mortgage, and then the burning of the church. So it's not really clear what happened. The firefighters thought possibly it was a bad extension cord. They found 2 extension cords running through the church. Then maybe those were the culprit. But it's always been suspected as arson, because only within 2 hours of that, another church about a block away burned down. But we don't really know. At any rate, Father Dorigas was the second full-time priest, that second long-term priest, and he comes in 1949, I think, runs into the building to try to save the communion. You're supposed to save it. The bread and the wine. There was some bread and wine at the table. So we leave some there at the table, and but it all been tipped over the fire. The only thing you could get was this gospel, which had been donated in 1927 from a family, Greek family. We still have that. This is kind of like our oldest relic in the church. So it was just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but we'd use it for readings, and something we keep in a prominent place. When you first enter the church, you would see it. And here's that is an image of the old building, first building, and that first priest, Father Stathis, is blessing the ground for what's going to be a new church. So here's the second one, and maybe some of you remember this. So built on the same sites, paid for mostly by insurance, fortunately. So they had to kind of keep the same dimensions. Second story balcony, I think, at the top, and fairly simple church. Nowadays, it was bought later, 1970, by Spiritual Israel as a church, and they're still there. But here you can see some of the parish council members, and actually there's a stained glass above them that says St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church is still there. Just went by yesterday to take a look, see if it's still there. They haven't got rid of the stained glass. Here you can see kind of what it looks like with the iconography. And I want to go to say something like Greek Festival, but here's just some images. In 1970, we moved to the corner of Mackinac McCarty. There was a donation, land donation. The church had become quite large. like 185 members by this point. Really couldn't fit in the old church, so through the blessing of the ground and so forth. So. And actually, this is the old iconography moved in. There's a visit from Archbishop Iakovos, who that in 1973 was the Archbishop of North and South America for the Greek Orthodox Church. That was kind of a big deal for us. Important guy. He marched in Selma with MLK. He was one of the religious leaders that heeded the call. But here's the new iconography, what it looks like, and I'm happy to answer questions about it. I do a lot of study of iconography. That's part of my research, really into that. Right. But you really got to see it at night. So you got to go for an Easter vigil. Right? It's really something to see how that gold leaf lit up. That's amazing. Now this is what we call epitaphial. It's the tomb. So every Holy Week, we have this wood structure, which is to mimic Christ's tomb. And laid flat inside of it is a cloth piece, a woven piece, which has the image of Christ lying deceased on it. And you go up to it and you kiss the image of him. And these are the girls, usually the myrrh bearers, because they were mentioned in the gospel of the women who came to anoint his body when he had died. So you know that. This is an old one from at least the second church building, epitaphium, which we have on the wall. We don't actually use this one, but it gives you a sense of what it is that you have lying down there. And there's hidden icons, like behind closed doors. There's nothing secret about them, but we just have so many icons, you got to put them someplace. And so there's kind of like closet areas on either side of the altar that the priest uses. And these tell their own story, like this one of Elijah going up in a chariot of fire, which was brought not that long ago by a Russian immigrant who doesn't speak a lick of English. But I had someone to translate, and she explained that she brought this from her home country, and she wanted to donate to the church. It's massive. I was like, actually, it's actually about the size of what's on the screen there. But each of these icons sometimes tell a story of origins. Like this one, let's see if I have the date on there. 1925, of St. Demetrius himself as a warrior. He was a warrior. Soldier, executed because he became a Christian. But we don't know the origins of it, except it probably came from Greece. Probably one of these immigrants brought it. And so we keep it there. Actually, the name St. Demetrius for the church was probably chosen because there was a large number of men named Demetrius. And so there was a voting. And for a few years, there was some confusion. Some people were calling it St. James. In early newspaper reports, it was called St. James. I'm not really sure what happened there. So maybe the James cohort lost out. I don't know. But the story of the festival is that, I mean, the ladies especially were doing bake sales for a long time, so they were quite organized with that. And then men started doing these cookouts. There was a downtown ethnic festival in Saginaw in 1974. We did it for a few years. And they started selling shish kebabs, and they would just sell out like immediately. And then this Lou Economou here, again, the first president of the festival, you know, people want it that bad. We should do it on our church grounds, right? And this is Chris and Agnes also. Or not Chris and Agnes, Chris Cetus. There's some other folks in here too, still around. But that was the idea. And so 1979, they put on the first one. And the estimate was some 20,000 people came. It was absolutely flooded. The main meat product was shish kebab. They didn't have gyros back then. A year later, Lou says to everyone, you know, I think we need like these gyros. People like these lamb sandwiches. And he couldn't convince people that would sell at hardest time. Just before COVID, we set a record. We sold 10,000 euros in one weekend. You just cannot make them fast enough. But you say the early days, they had lamb on a spit, and they would have to saw this thing. So anyway, I'm out of time, but okay. But here's the 1985 faded windstorm, which, you know, it became a real fish story. You know, like Lou would talk about how he grabbed a hold of one edge of a tent, and he ended up on the roof. I mean, and then I'm pretty sure one version of the story went to heaven or something. And like, it was just like crazier every time I told the story. But nonetheless, there was something to this, that there was this horrible windstorm. So there were these setbacks. And but for months, not just women, men too, help out baking these products. Many of them have to be frozen for a while. I know all those recipes. And then usually February, we get started, to be honest with you. And then, many of you know this scene. The beginning of the festival, this is Father Timothy Cook, a wonderful priest, young priest, really good with kids. A lot of fun, but he comes around with holy water and blesses people, and he makes sure you get a lot of water. So that's how I get going. So this is, what's his name? Ken Horn, Senator Ken Horn. Yeah, it's still who's who. You get a lot of senators and so on to come help out. He often helps in the Euros. And the long history of the dances. I mean, these dances have their origins millennia back. The Greek word for dance, the major word for it is chora, like a chorus. The Greek tragedies that you have a chorus comes from the dancers. Chora means circle. So it makes sense, right? They think of dancing as a circle, but I mean, maybe some of these dances that we're doing have roots even a couple thousand years ago. The food, the recipes, they were very careful from the beginning to have recipes that they brought from the old country. They wanted this to be really authentic. They're really proud of all of that. There's a long history of dancers and sometimes kids. They're the cute ones, right? There's my wife. She's having a good old time. There's my son, actually, right there. But, of course, the older ones are really good. So we got dancers coming up from, not quite Detroit. I can't remember where they're coming from this time. I think it's Ann Arbor, actually. Yep, Ann Arbor. We got some really good dancers coming this time. So we've sometimes brought musicians and dancers from Canada. I think as far away as Toronto, Ohio, New York. But yeah, we get some good shows. Yeah, please.
Costuming for the dancers.
Yeah.
Would each village or each have their own costuming?
Yeah, typically. So what we do for the costumes, you guys order them from Greece. But they're going to be from some particular area. And a lot of times they're from Athens. But so it's not necessarily the case that someone who's dancing in the outfit necessarily comes from that place. But they are quite authentic in the sense that they're Greek. And this is something I'm very proud of. In recent years, I've really tried to move away from this being a fundraiser primarily for the church and making it more and more a fundraiser for the community. And whether there's a sign or whether there's a large donation to Zoll Library, we did one year. Every year we donate quite a bit to Novell Catholic Central, and their sports teams help us set up. But my count now 55 organizations that we have donated to, almost all of them in the Tri-City area. I like to keep it local, and that'll keep growing. So, I mean, you know some of these, Underground Railroad and so on, and Mustard Seed. And then sometimes high school groups, like teams from Heritage High, like, I think I can't remember these, volleyball or what, but they'll volunteer, and then we'll donate some money to their team. We do a lot of that. So we try to help out the community. Whatever food is left over, sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's not much, but it all goes to Hidden Harvest. So yeah. That's kind of the whole of it. I won't keep it too long, but I'm happy to answer questions.
We have a little time for some questions, if anybody has them. Kind of peppered them. Is everybody hungry now? Because
I really wanted to
like
bring you
Michael
some
Friday.
things, but we don't have the pastries ready yet, so I was going to. Yeah.
It's all right. You know, it's good advertisement. We'll all want to turn out to get a gyro. Oh.
Sure, go ahead. That's right. Yep. And there's Jim Kokas, and yeah. Oh yeah.
What was the main reason for people leaving Greece way back when?
So I think a lot of it is just poverty, but I think also I think a lot of the men wanted to. They could go in. They had mandatory 3-year service in the army in Greece.
okay.
Now it's a year and a half here in Greece. But a lot of them thought this is just. A lot of them felt their families couldn't take that. Maybe they're the only son in the family, and it's a farm, and we got to do something. And so a lot of them were stowaways, honestly. My great grandfather was a stowaway on ship. So they would try something. They're desperate.
Question 2. You talked about being non-white.
Yeah.
Today, is that a problem when you have a census and they want the ethnicity?
We got some people in our church who insist that when there's a 10-year census that we should not check white. My wife tells me I'm not white, but I'm white. Come on. But this is kind of
an other category, or?
Yeah, a lot of times there is a write-in category, and a lot of times they'll write Hellenic, which means Greek. Hellas is the Greek word for Greece. So sometimes they will do that. But, this is an interesting phenomenon to me, too, and it has a lot to do with immigration, that it's a whitening of America. And so, originally with Italian immigrants, they were not considered white. If you're not Northern European, maybe you're not white, or you're not white enough. And so, but then this category sort of grows over time. And so it's kind of, it's in one sense, it's a mythology. The race is a mapping we're doing for each other. We're choosing to identify people on color or their hair types or their, eye color, nose shape, whatever. It doesn't, or some kind of combination of those things. Really, I talk about this a lot in my philosophy classes. I think that you should consider race, at least as we've come to make it in the U.S., as a kind of ancestral mapping. So your race really is about who your ancestors are. So so that there's a sense in which you're not allowed to get out of it. So you're born into it, right? We have that notion, but it's still there's a kind of flexibility to how we understand these categories. And then someone's kind of crazy to me, these brown people now. What's that? How many people? Was it Hispanic, South Asian? Even South Asian is a category, So we have these ways. We want to have boxes on our census and things like that, but it is kind of a strange mapping, categorization. But these maps grow sometimes and they shrink sometimes. What else?
Question?
Yeah.
Is the Greek language spoken locally much? Are you teaching it to the children, or is this another lost language?
We tried to reinvigorate it before COVID. My wife started teaching kind of like as a Sunday school class after church, Greek school, and she had maybe 25 students. Didn't work so well. They weren't coming regularly. The St. Demetrius now has, like I said, less than half of the people in the congregation are actually of Greek descent at all. So in the old days, 1940, when they had the church set up, the liturgy would have been Greek. And it would have been very similar to the experience, those of you who are Catholic, you remember pre-Vatican II days, and everything being in Latin. It would have been just like that, except it would have been Greek. Obviously, just like that. It's a very similar liturgy, actually. But then over the years, because there are fewer people that spoke Greek, we started doing more and more of the liturgy in English. So there's a tiny bit of the liturgy we still do in Greek. Like when we say the Our Father, we do that in Greek and in English. And there's a few other things too. What the majority of it is English, because most of the people in the congregation speak that. And now, I appreciate the question, because you're reminding me of something I want to say. It's not just that there are fewer and fewer Greeks at St. Demetrius, but there's been other immigration waves from Eastern Orthodox countries. So Eastern Orthodox Christianity is common in Eastern Europe. So it includes Greece, but everything from Bulgaria to Ukraine to Russia, but also Syria, Jerusalem, a lot of Christians in Jerusalem, Egypt, Ethiopia. So it's really a very Eastern form of Christianity. And so we've been getting folks, some trickle of immigrants from those countries, quite a few. Actually, Jordan, we have a few families from Jordan now. And actually Palestinian Christians too. They're Orthodox, so they go to our church. And I think this is so cool. So now we have Ethiopian family recently had a baptism. I got the godfather. So happy. And they bring their own traditions. They have these beautiful cotton gowns that they wear for different services, and it's a little different. Their liturgy back in Ethiopia wouldn't be exactly the same, but they're in communion. They're considered part of they're called the Coptic Christians. But anyway, yeah, it was fantastic. So here's the mom having the baptism, and she was married to a man from Cyprus, actually, Greek from Cyprus. But yeah, we're having all these new traditions coming in, and so actually a lot of times, like, we'll do things in the service, like especially Our Father, will, depending on who's there that day, will have someone say it and lead it in English, someone say it in Greek, someone say it in Jordanian.
Wow.
We have a young lady, sometimes we ask her to do it in Chinese. We've done more. Oh, Romanian, we've got Romanian family. Eastern Orthodoxy have resurgence in some of these countries now that they're not communist anymore. So Romania is a good example of that. It's a hotbed for Orthodox Christianity. So yeah, we got a Romanian family. So, and they bring their food, Ethiopian food. It's not just Greek food that's good. Ethiopian food is good. So this is, to me, a really exciting time too, and these new folks that are coming in, a lot of them, they're not coming from those countries. They're just, they're coming because they're just Americans who are looking for some kind of historical experience. They kind of want that pre-Vatican II thing. They want to have something that's very, very historical. And so a lot of them, they come from Protestant backgrounds or the Catholic, and they convert. And they're in it for the theology. Like it's not really an ethnic thing for them. I mean, they appreciate this ethnic stuff, but they're really, really into orthodoxy as a form of Christianity. And so that's exciting to me too. But not to take away from those early immigrants. I mean, to go across the Atlantic for the first time, maybe by yourself, is an act of faith. I mean, like, my mother-in-law, she died not long ago. She used to always tell a story. I heard it 50 times. All she had was one suitcase, one small suitcase, and didn't know what this is going to be like in Michigan. She didn't know anything about Michigan, but that's a big deal. I mean, you might as well be going to the moon 100 years ago. Oh, that's scary stuff. And so you're putting your life on the line for this. You don't know what's going to happen.
Thank you very much for sharing. That's all the time we have for today, but there are some items for you to look at, and I'm sure maybe Dr. Nichols could speak with you afterwards. But at this point, I just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also, let him sit down if he needs to.
I should probably sit down, yeah. Yeah.